My Livable City, a magazine for architects, planners, designers, developers, leaders. Learn how great cities around the world make it work. Subscribe at mylivablecity.com.
Hello everyone. Welcome to DAIDA Global Awards Ceremony 2022, organized and hosted by My Livable City, an international knowledge platform focused on urban sustainability and livability. I'm Yamini Kumar, a fellow architect based in Bangalore, India, and part of the My Livable City team. I will be hosting the award ceremony today. Next slide, please. Every year, DAIDA announces a theme for the awards. In 2020, the theme was Water and Development. In 2021, it was the Inclusive City, and in 2022, it was Climate Change. Next slide, please. DAIDA Foundation's vision of a possible solution to climate change. The COVID crisis could have been a dress rehearsal for the world to lead humanity to rethink its path of so-called progress. Unfortunately, such hopes have been dashed. Except for a temporary lull in economic activities, which translated to lesser use of fossil energy, a smaller carbon footprint, and generally reduced environmental pollution, most economic activities have bounced back, and the exploitation of our planetary resources continues unabated. If there was ever a problem that could only be solved by international cooperation, then climate change is the one. If there was ever a problem that needs to be solved using all the creativity we have, then climate change is the one. If there was ever a problem that can create social and economic havoc in societies around the world, then climate change is the one. If there was ever a problem that will affect the younger generation more than the older generation, then climate change is the one. DAIDA Foundation, therefore, calls upon young professionals of today to contribute ideas that will guarantee the habitability of our planet in general and the livability of our cities in particular through design and research to contribute towards finding solutions for an equitable way forward, since climate change will hit the most vulnerable the hardest. Next slide, please. This year, DAIDA received 33 thesis submissions from 18 participating institutions from 6 countries. These submissions proposed ideas across 11 countries. From the 33 submissions, an international jury shortlisted 10 finalists who presented their work to the jury. Today, the first, second, and third prize winners will be announced and will be called upon to present their projects. The jury process will be further explained by Mr. Khandekar as the session progresses. Next slide, please. I'd first like to call upon Liesl Vivier, DAIDA board member, to speak about the DAIDA Foundation. Liesl is an architect urban planner in Zimbabwe and the Netherlands. She is the deputy head of the Department of Urban Development in Almere, the Netherlands. She worked as an urbanist on large-scale projects of urban regeneration. Over to you, Liesl.
Thank you, Yamini. And on behalf of the DAIDA Foundation, I would like to give a warm welcome to you all on this award ceremony. I would like to take the opportunity to also tell you a little bit more about the DAIDA Foundation. DAIDA was set up about 5 years ago and is a small foundation based in the Netherlands, but with a global outreach. Our mission is to support institutions or groups of individuals involved in improving the infrastructure and living conditions of vulnerable citizens in cities of the developing world. Our support is provided in the form of donations. And these donations can be used to implement a project, to educate people, to fund the research, or even to fund the spread of information, such as books or films. The applications we receive for our support are via people that we know and people that we trust. We don't have a huge controlling mechanism in place, so the grant applications are often based on trust. May I have the next slide, please? There are 5 board members, and 3 of these are involved in urban development in emerging economies. Myself, Sham Kandekar, and Leo Lodder, who is a development economist based in the Netherlands. Sham Kandekar is an urban planner, as I am. On the board, we also have Ari van der Ven, who is a consultant in public services, and we have Siddharth Kandekar, who is a real estate expert, and his expertise is in affordable housing. May I have the next slide, please? Here you see a slide with countries where we are supporting projects. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are a small foundation, but we have a global outreach. In these 5 years, we have supported projects across 3 continents and in many countries in those continents. May I have the next slide, please? Here you see a selection of DAIDA projects that we have supported in the last 5 years. We have supported 2 projects of Pukar, the Youth Fellowship Program, and the Journey Towards Dignity Program, which were both based in Mumbai. In Zimbabwe, we support the foundation Streams of Hope, where we pay the school fees for orphaned children, and we also support a sewing program so that jobless people live in the city of Harare can follow the sewing program and can learn to support themselves through sewing. In Kenya, we donated funds to a community-based organization called Mustard Seed in order to build a multi-purpose community center in Dandora. And Dandora is one of the slums of Nairobi. The center is now used for part-time for school-going children. It is also a place for interaction and recreation for the community of Dandora. We have also provided funds for a publication grant for a book, Affordable Housing and Inclusive Cities, and we funded research into homelessness in Manila and housing improvement in Thailand. So this is just a cluster of the type of projects that we have funded in the last 5 years. I hope that all of you now have an idea of what DAIDA does and what we stand for and the type of projects that we support. I will now hand the presentation back to Yamini, who will introduce the next speaker.
Thank you for your presentation, Liesl. I'd now like to call upon Shashikala Venkatraman, co-founder and director of My Livable City, to talk about the Knowledge Platform. UK and USA over the last 35 years. She currently serves as an independent director on company boards and advises private equity firms in India. Over to you, Shashi.
Thank you, Yamini, for that nice introduction. I'd like to welcome all of you this evening for the DAIDA Awards. We have the privilege of presenting it again this year. And I'm sure all of you are anxious to get started on the main menu of the day. I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about My Livable City. For some of you, this may be a familiar name, but for those of you who don't know anything about My Livable City, I'd like to spend a few minutes giving you some sense of what we do. Just an important statistic. Every day, every minute in India, 25 to 30 people try to migrate from the rural areas to urban locations, all in search of a better life. If this continues, then before the end of the decade, we will have 600 million people trying to live in our cities. Cities which are inadequately provided for, infrastructure is not adequate. So we are going to face huge problems. And this is not true just of India, but we will see this across Africa, across other places in Asia. So about 8 years ago, my business partner and co-founder in My Livable City, we got talking and we felt, is there a way to help in this transformation of cities so that we can help in this urbanization process? And one of the ideas we came up with was, why not create a network of experts, a network of intellectuals, people who have expertise, hands-on expertise, people who have devoted their lives singularly to trying to create cities which were sustainable, which were livable, which were equitable. And so My Livable City as a knowledge platform was born. Could I take the next slide? Ankit. So today, we have the privilege of inviting thought leaders, academics, practitioners, the highest quality professionals to write for us, to participate in our activities from all over the world. We have expressed their projects, their thoughts, next slide, through the pages of our magazine, in our books, next slide. And of course, through our website. We are also very active on the ground. We have many expert programs, which are teach-in programs in different locations around the world. All this to ensure that there is enough knowledge and expertise so that the transformation of our urban locations can actually accommodate all the aspirations of the rural people who are trying to migrate. I would also like to use this occasion to announce that the winners of today's DAIDA Awards will have the privilege of showcasing their projects in the pages of our magazine, alongside some of the finest minds in this business. So that is a privilege indeed. And to all the finalists, I would like to offer you an annual subscription of My Livable City, the platform, so that you can also participate in this knowledge sharing process. And with that, let me hand this back to Yamini. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Shashi. I'd now like to introduce our chief guest, John Jung. Next slide, please. John is the chairman and co-founder of Intelligent Community Forum. He is recognized for originating the concept of an intelligent community and continues to serve as the forum's leading visionary. Over to you, John.
Yes. Hello from Toronto, Canada. I'm talking about climate change. I've been invited to speak about a very complex issue, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it from a smart city and intelligent community perspective. First of all, as we all know, climate change is a very complex issue, and I'm not going to be able to speak about every angle, but I'm going to try and provide an overview. The first part of it is, of course, that our planet's average temperature is, of course, already having increased by 1 degree Celsius since pre-industrial times. And the greater that that increase occurs, the worse our planet will evolve. And so what we have decided as a society, as a global society, is to limit it to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And that was done in the Paris Agreement in 2015 by 194 parties. Now, without it, we will continue to see devastating impacts. For instance, we're going to see the sea levels rise, and that'll impact many of the world's largest cities and its infrastructure. We're going to see significant extreme weather events. We're going to see our marine life decimated, particularly due to acidic waters. There's going to be great loss of diversity. And of course, the health impacts are going to be extreme. In those areas where there was never malaria or West Nile virus, these places will begin to experience it. And we're going to have extreme social impacts. We're going to see mass migration. There's going to be issues of migrant justice, political shifts. We're seeing water wars and so forth. Now, there's significant economic impacts for the city life as well. We see this not only in terms of our tourism issues, but also in terms of agriculture and so forth. And I believe that advanced technologies are needed to become more sustainable and resilient and able to have communities adapt to climate change. Now, how are we going to address this? We're going to need to have a completely different point of view of everything we do. We're going to have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, particularly carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. And through transitioning to renewable energy sources, we're hopefully going to improve our energy efficiency as well. We're going to have to design strategies that likely include technologies. We know that now through developing wind, solar, geothermal, and hydropower everywhere. Of course, this must be aided by artificial intelligence and sensors through the Internet of Things. We're going to be using advanced technologies so that we can form data and the data analytics necessary for their participation. We're going to need to have sustainable infrastructure and mobility. Excuse me. And of course, reforestation and improved agricultural practices. Excuse me. Improved agricultural practices, land management policies and strategies, and processes to ensure food distribution and food security. We're going to need to look at the pursuit of urban forestry, as well as urban farming strategies and the regeneration of our soil. We're going to design our buildings to be more energy efficient, and we're going to need to enforce our building codes. And we're going to need to develop strategies to reduce our emissions, particularly through the use of processes that avoid single-use plastics that have created huge disruption in our marine life, such as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And we're going to need to have climate-friendly policies to limit emissions and more organized programs such as COP28 coming forward. Now, I've written a book recently that looks at the behavior of individuals in part of this. And the story is about the climate change having impacted communities of 4 degrees Celsius. Now, that's fiction, but it's true. We need to, in reality, begin to move people's attitudes and change their behaviors. And one of those best ways to do that is to look at what best practices are happening in some of the smart cities and intelligent communities around the world. I'm going to be giving several examples here. Espoo in Finland is one that's a model Smart 21 community, but so are many, many others. And I'm going to differentiate between smart cities and intelligent communities. Now, smart cities basically look at technology-driven solutions and data analytics, whereas intelligent communities take a look at it on a more holistic basis. Technologies can help, of course, and that's the basis of it, but we need to have strategies that address economic, social, and cultural challenges as well as we evolve, and therefore create that supportive environment for innovation, digital inclusion, sustainability, and long-term resilience. And by using these, technologies can help in terms of resiliency and sustainability, improve our overall environment, reduce waste, and limit the climate greenhouse gas emissions. So let's look at some of these cities. For instance, in the intelligent community of Toronto, they were pioneer in sustainable urban design, but also innovative district heating and cooling using deep water, green buildings, and so forth. Amsterdam, you're familiar with it, particularly with the bike use. And here in front of the station is a brand new underground garage for bikes, as an example. Curitiba in Brazil, it deploys innovative urban planning and transportation systems, and it uses an extensive green system around the city. Barcelona, very walkable city, sustainable transportation, and a huge focus on renewable energy. Masdar in UAE, Abu Dhabi area. They're a zero carbon community with a focus on renewable energy, sustainable transportation, and innovative open air conditioning through air towers. Intelligent Community Taipei, it reduces vehicular traffic in their communities through significant public transportation and bike lanes. They've installed solar panels just everywhere, and they've reduced its reliance on fossil fuels, implementing a zero waste initiatives to become a zero waste city by 2030. And Eindhoven, as a community that excels in its triple helix approach, they've been recognized as a circular economy model. And they, of course, are looking at promoting sustainable production and consumption, which reduces waste and conserves resources. Now, a lot of these smart cities, intelligent communities use real-time data and predictive analytics, which will help to improve disaster response and many other environmental and sustainability related matters. So for instance, in New York City, they have used it to anticipate the impact of storms, predict coastal flooding, and prioritize matters related to their community. And so is Tokyo. They use sensors and cameras to track movement of people and vehicles and predicting evacuation patterns as necessary. Another one is in Melbourne, where they use it for disaster response planning. Rio de Janeiro, again, for flood and landslide control. And they, of course, use a lot of satellite technology as an early warning system. In Taichung in Taiwan, they use drones and sensors to manage floods and landslides and to monitor and service agriculture. In Cape Town, they use it to monitor waste management, disasters related to water control. Now, smart communities, of course, use it for health-related and social services matters, as well as education. It helps to reduce inequalities and encourage inclusiveness and many other very positive things for their communities. Now, people will say it's a very costly thing to involve, and really it can be, in fact, very lucrative. What we're looking at is a huge program in the United States, the Inflation Reduction Act, which has attracted a lot of investment and created a lot of jobs. And not to be outdone, the EU has done a similar program. And so they have said that global investment in decarbonization has surpassed $1 trillion in 2022, on par for the first time with investments in fossil fuels. So just to conclude, it's a big issue. It requires a global effort as well as individual commitments to reduce greenhouse gases. I think it's important for everybody that is involved in the DAIDA Awards to think in terms of resiliency and sustainability, but you can do this on an individual basis by helping to change people's behaviors and attitudes around this. And I recommend that you take a look more at this particular issue as you proceed. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you. Pass it back to the organizers.
Thank you, John, for your presentation and valuable insights. And thank you very much for being with us today. I'd like to call upon Shyam Khandekar, founder and chairman of DAIDA Foundation. Next slide, please. Is the slide up? I see. Okay, I can't see that.
I can't see it either. Ankit, I can't see it either. I see John's slide. Yes.
Thank you. Shyam is an architect, urban planner, and urban designer. He is also the co-founder of My Livable City and is an author and editor. My Livable City has published 3 books under his guidance: Affordable Housing, Inclusive Cities, Designing for Sustainability Through Upcycling, and the latest release, Streets for All, 50 Ideas for Shaping Resilient Cities, published in 2022, has been edited by him. Over to you, Shyam.
Good day. Hello to all of you in different parts of the world. Good morning and good evening. After you are aware, as Jung just now pointed out, the big issues which are related to climate change and the grave situation we are all in. And yet it gives me, I talk with a sense of optimism, because young people like you, what a delight it is to see that you have taken subjects which try to tackle this problem head on in the thesis subjects you have chosen. I must admit, I must confess actually, that compared to your topics, which are so very socially and environmentally relevant, when I graduated in 1972, and some of the younger jury members graduated after that, I think this environmental and social relevancy in our topics was much less. We were very much concerned at that time with design in the 3-dimensional design aesthetics. So it's a great pleasure to see you people tackling these subjects, and DAIDA hopes to every year decide on a theme which will help and which will encourage young people to take up subjects for their thesis. To judge your submissions, which were on a vast number of subjects, because the way Jung pointed out, there are so many issues which can be tackled to mitigate the effects of climate change. We had a jury which was clearly very qualified, but which created its own problem, because the 4 jury members had different backgrounds, came from different parts of the world, but also at the same time also had experience in different issues. So we had Liesel Vivier, who had presented just now the issues, the work terrain of DAIDA. She's an urban planner and from Zimbabwe and Netherlands. Then we had Claudio Ascioli, who's a very senior urban planner and architect, but his expertise is, he has been consultant to so many different organizations in the world, including UN Habitat, etc., and also advisor to many governments around the world in the emerging economies. And his expertise is very much into the policy issues which governments work with. And then we had Dr. Anita Patil Deshmukh, who is actually a medical profession by training, but has moved on to do social work by heading an agency, an NGO called Pukar, which is in Mumbai. So I was the 4th member of the jury, and all of us tried to judge the submissions. Believe me, it was very difficult for us to judge your submissions because so many of you targeted the issue of mitigation of effects of climate change at different levels. So some did it at a very detailed level, and others did it at a very abstract level. So it was very difficult to judge, and yet we discussed and came to a conclusion. And at a certain moment, we came to, and we had to come to a shortlist, because can I have the next slide, please? Because we had basically to decide on a first prize, a second for 6,000 euros, but the money is just now irrelevant, second prize, and a third prize. And at this was together 15,000 euros, but we had another 5,000 euro also to distribute for some special performance. And we wanted to use it. So can I have the next slide, please? The institutions which had sent in the applications this year, from 6, here you see a list from different parts of the world. There are 6 different countries from different continents. And if you can go to the next one, please. And you can see here in black the countries from where the institutions participated. And in the terracotta color, you can see the countries where the different submissions, the projects are from. So obviously there are many institutions where the students do their projects in other countries than where the institutions themselves are from. So this was a wide variety, but like I said, the level of abstraction was different. There were design issues and research issues. This led, can I have the next slide, please? So after we had the first set of deliberations, we reduced the number to 10 shortlisted candidates. So these 10 shortlisted candidates, welcome to all of you. You presented, can I have the next one, please? Next slide, please, Ankit. So these 10 candidates you see here, very interestingly, equal representation of women and men. I think the women outnumbering men, if I'm not wrong. Excuse me. With projects from different countries, and once again, very varied. So from you all, we had to decide to choose our winners. Let me tell you, we were not unanimous in decide. Last year, we had a winner where all the jury members very quickly agreed to that person was actually the most likely winner for this year, for that year. This year, the discussions were much more vigorous. We were not unanimous on thing in the first round, but after some discussion, we came to the following conclusion. We came to the conclusion that there were, out of 10, there were 5 candidates who we thought clearly needed some sort of recognition. Let's put it like this. They were the best. They floated up as being the best among the 10. But we had only 3 prizes to distribute. So what we have done is we have got a first prize, we have got a second prize, we've got a joint third prize, so 2 parties, and we have got 1 person who we particularly want to recommend as a recommendation prize, because we think that that particular student has tackled a subject head on, which is very big. So I'll start with that. So that's what we have called the special mention prize. Can I have the next slide, please? We'd like to give the special mention prize first. Can I have the special mention? Can I have the next slide, please? To Priscilla Namwanye from TU Delft in the Netherlands. And she has tackled the issue of formality and informality in planning issues. So very problem that in so many emerging economies, you have the formal regulations and yet they do not get followed. And how do you then come to solutions via informal ways and combining the formal and the informal? And she tackled this big issue, and we'd like to compliment her for taking on this big project. As test case, she took on a particular project in Kampala, Uganda. Congratulations, Priscilla, for this special mention. Can I have the next slide, please? Then we had the joint third prize winners. So we have 2 parties who have won the third prize, and we'd like to give each of them 4,000 euros as a prize money. And one of them is, can I have the next slide, please? Is Sebastian Oviedo from the Catholic University Leuven in Belgium. And he has done a project which is related to how the communas, the local people in communities and their communities, how they could be involved in the planning issue. In fact, he comes a little very close also to what Priscilla is talking about, and he shows it, demonstrates it via a project in Ecuador. So he will be making a presentation of 10 minutes so you can listen better to him, but it's a project in Ecuador. So congratulations, Sebastian, for winning the third prize. Can I have the next slide, please? The next joint winner, third prize winner, is Diana Barrera Salazar. She's from Ain Shams University in Cairo, Egypt. I think they team up with the University of Stuttgart in Germany. And she went to a totally different abstraction. It's about the role of bamboo in regenerative development in the country, I think, where she originally comes from, which is Colombia. So she will also be making a presentation of 10 minutes after some time. So I will not go further into detail. Congratulations, Diana, on winning the third prize together, jointly with Sebastian. Then we have the second prize. Can I have the next slide, please? The second prize of 5,000 euros goes to, can I have the slide, please? To Tessa Chitenden. I don't know if I pronounced your name correctly. University of Cape Town, South Africa. And she dealt with a problem which actually countries, cities in all over the world face. And this is about how cities keep on expanding and increasing their footprint at the cost of green areas at the edges. So she has tried to tackle this problem head on by taking a particular edge of Cape Town, which is called Philippi Horticultural Areas. So Tessa, congratulations. We'd like to, I think you'd like to present your case again to others after my talk. And then, can I have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. All those, by the way, before I say the first prize, all those who have not won, please, just simply by the fact that you have come in the short list, effectively you all have done very well. So let me congratulate all the others who have not won, just for being on the short list. And the first prize goes to, which is 6,000 euros, goes to, can I have the slide, please? To Valerian Portocalis and Xenia Stompu, also of Catholic University Leuven in Belgium. So congratulations, Valerian and Xenia, for this. The reason why we thought their prize, their project deserved the first prize was that they discuss an issue which is about how do you reuse industrial areas of cities, redevelop them for different purposes. You, at the same time, how you look into the fact that cities, rivers which have dried up, how you make them again accessible and use them in such a way that climate issues are tackled. So and we think this, what they have done is also applicable in other parts of the world. So congratulations, and we look forward to also listening to you after me. So with that, I'll end my speech, and thank you, all of you, for taking part in this. And please spread the word so that next year we'll have more people. Thank you so much. Over to you, Yamini.
Thank you for your presentation, Shyam. And congratulations to all the winners. This was a fierce competition, and congratulations are in order for all 10 shortlisted candidates. I'd like to invite Sebastian Oviedo, joint third prize winner, to present his work. Please strictly limit your time to 10 minutes. Over to you, Sebastian.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. This is a really great honor, and congratulations to everyone else. I will be presenting my thesis called Spatializing the Communal, which I did at KU Leuven with the supervision of Professor Viviana Dauria and Jeroen Stevens. The thesis focuses on Ilaló, an inactive volcano on the eastern valleys of my home city, Quito, in Ecuador. And Ilaló is one of the city's largest protected forests. It is a crucial biodiversity hub, and it's also a climate cycle regulator for the region. However, the area is increasingly threatened by suburbanization, intensive agriculture, and logging. The area of Ilaló includes 12 comunas, or communal indigenous territories. And despite having legally recognized planning mechanisms, practices, and institutions, as well as internationally protected land rights, these communities are insistently excluded from state planning and policy making. This threatens the collective rights of comunas, creates frictions, and jeopardizes the socio-ecological health of these territories, and creates protests such as the one you can see here from 2015. To amend this disconnect, the thesis is developed in collaborative dialogue with leaders and inhabitants of 3 of these comunas, which you can see at the bottom. The areas Union in the center, Uxil, and Pueblo Quitucara, which are all articulated with the country's indigenous movement. The first section of my thesis elaborates cross-scalar cartographic analysis to illustrate the role of communal practices in sustaining systems of water, forest, and land. A second section uses design as an eye-opener in the ancestral community of La Toxa. And building upon existing practices and ongoing transformations here, the project explores strategies that the comuna can use to nurture the socio-ecological health of Ilaló, address climate change, and uphold their collective rights. In the first part, I looked at 3 comunas across scales. Tola Chica, where climate change has exacerbated water stress. Alangasí, where forests are contested. And La Togda, the collapsed crater of the volcano, where land systems are at the center of communal practices. Drawing from immersive fieldwork, extensive literature review, and historic cartographies, this section weaves together the scale of the ethnographic encounter on the one, all the way to the landscape structures in this area that have regional magnitude. So in Tola Chica, for example, the cartographies begin with Fabiola, a comunera who built her makeshift laundry across the road from her home. And this then helps uncover a broader repertoire of water practices and systems built by the Neros to make Tola Chica inhabitable. The thesis provides evidence of how the construction of a major road in 2014 displaced comuneros above the irrigation canal and potable water network, as you can see here. And you can see how water ponds are communally produced between 2010 and 2014 as more people are displaced above the line. Water also structures ceremonial practices in this dry area, increasingly affected by drought. Besides building water systems, have historically ascended to Huila del Señor, a sacred tree on the summit, to ask for the rains every year. In Alangasí, a communal cleanup day in Mamatena, a native forest remnant, acts as a gateway to look at the historical changes in livelihoods and their impact on these forests, which is materialized here, among other things, in drinking fountains that were sculpted for cattle. Extractive and replenishing practices enter in conflict in this area. Here, eucalyptus monocultures and logging compete with communal forest uses and reforestation practices. Through historic cartographies and archival material, the thesis shows the continuities of these forest contestations with colonial and post-colonial trajectories, as you can see on this map from the 17th century. In La Togda, a communal assembly provides the entry point to discuss the relationship between direct democracy and land systems. Here, communal governance takes place in the school. Nestled in the ravine, the school is like a stage within the amphitheater-shaped crater. The few flat areas in La Togda are used intensively. The central plateaus in Uxapamba for festivities, Paquiloma with the school hosts most assemblies, and makeshift structures and fences try to prevent privatization in Jacpi, which is an area that we will return to. The 3 flat areas in Ilaló's comuna, so in the 12 comunas, have either been seized, privatized, or are currently under dispute. Historically, communal territories have been pushed up the slopes. As the catastrophic landslides of Comuna Santa Clara de San Millán last year illustrated, displacement has made comunas disproportionately vulnerable to the effects of climate change. The cartographies thus call attention to environmental justice and climate change adaptation as deeply entangled and urgent urban agendas, supporting the demands of comunas themselves. I developed the projective section of my thesis in La Togda based on a request for suggestions by the communal council. And here in 2020, parts of this communal land were illegally registered as private in the municipal cadastre by outsiders. Response, comuneros built a grid of microparcels and dirt roads here. Makeshift structures, fences, and crops were used to assert communal presence on the site. Taking this as a starting point, the design then proposes to scale up the sustainable ecosystem management practices of comunas to counter suburbanization, intensive agriculture, and logging. The thesis thus envisions how comuneros could reopen Jacpi's ravine, reclaim road runoff, and build swale-down contours as the spatial armature and irrigation system of this area. Reorganizing the existing reforestation efforts along these green and blue threads, La TOCDA can reverse land degradation, reestablish water cycles, increase biodiversity, and improve settlements while securing livelihoods. Comuneros can re-indigenize the monoculture, keeping a third of the eucalyptus as bands on contour to prevent erosion, while reproducing a more complex forest. Mobilizing the monumentality of the river canyon, comuneros can sculpt plateaus into stages for communal life, which are highlighted here in orange. For example, making use of their alignment with the equinox for celebration, or positioning communal tree nurseries to set the framework for settlement. Comuneros can then embed their individual or collective dwellings within the agroforestal armature of amunas and terraces. Constructed wetlands and ponds can support community-led systems of water catchment, provision, treatment, and recycling, and communal infrastructure can be strategically placed on the safer flat areas. The thesis engages with the communal project as a more socio-ecologically sound mode of understanding and inhabiting landscapes to face the climate crisis. The question of comunas as indigenous territories in the urban is relevant at different scales. On a local level, the thesis demonstrates the importance of their inclusion in urban and environmental planning, to develop a shared territorial agenda and to protect the social ecologies that Ilaló and more broadly Quito depends on. On a larger level, this collaboration with comunas draws attention to their potential and supports their demands to be included in planning mechanisms to materialize Ecuador's constitutional promises of buen vivir, the rights of nature, and the plurinational state. But comunas are also relevant on an even larger scale. They are part of the world's land, currently still managed by indigenous peoples, which, although it has been reduced to 20% of the world's surface, still holds 80% of the planet's biodiversity. So the thesis proposes a form of doing urbanism and planning with the communities that are at the front of climate adaptation, and whose rights, knowledges, ontologies, institutions, and practices are crucial to face the climate crisis in an intercultural and socially just way. While specifically tackling several sustainable development goals, which I've highlighted here, the thesis fundamentally addresses the main premise of the 2030 Agenda, which is to leave no one behind. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your presentation, Sebastian, and congratulations on such a well-thought-out project.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite Diana Barrera Salazar, Joint Third Prize winner, to present her work. Please limit your time to 10 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. And I also want to extend my thank you to the jury and to my colleagues that also participated in this award and feel really honored. And so coming to my master thesis, the topic is the role of bamboo in regenerative development, the case of Guava angustifolia in rural areas of Caldas, Colombia. Starting with the research overview, and in this current climate crisis framework, you may be wondering why bamboo? Well, bamboo forest as a renewable natural resource can be both climate change mitigator as part of its ecosystem services and a community builder, creating more resilient and sustainable livelihoods. Bamboos are mainly located in tropic and subtropic areas of the world, where the major producers and exporters are located in Asia. Even though the Americas has a great potential to be part of this global market, for example, in Colombia, the participation is only 0.1%. Colombia has the second greatest diversity of bamboos in the Americas, and this is represented in up to 24 native species that are part of the country, where Guava angustifolia is the most relevant and the one that I was focusing on my research. Guava, as you can see, is mainly located in the coffee region, which is in the central part of the country. And this region is composed by 3 provinces, where Caldas is the province with the second largest amount of guava hectares, but at the same time is where the highest fragmentation of guava forest and rural poverty index are. So what I wanted to do through this research was to understand how this degenerative development that bamboo forests or guava forests have been having in the country, represented in the decline and deterioration of these ecosystems, has been turned into a regenerative development through the understanding of the role of bamboo in this transition. The research question that guided this research was, what can be the role of guava in promoting regenerative development in rural areas of Caldas, Colombia? For this, I defined 3 specific objectives. The first one was to describe the historical dynamics of guava in Caldas. The second one was to explain the current dynamics and dimensions. And the third one was to explore how these dimensions and dynamics can promote regenerative development in rural areas of the province. This research was mainly a qualitative research, and the strategies were desk research and case study. Moving on to the theoretical framework, the conceptual framework was based on understanding first how conventional development is one of the main causes of the current climate crisis, and at the same time how this crisis could make more vulnerable the rural livelihoods. And this is how the role of bamboo comes in to through the climate action and mitigation, but also as an alternative for rural livelihood provision. And for this, I use the regenerative development as a framework to understand the dimensions and dynamics through the 4 dimensions, which are ecological, sociocultural, economic, and institutional. Moving on to the case study, and as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to be focusing on Caldas as part of the coffee region. And as you can see in this map, most of the bamboo forests or guava forests are located in the Cauca River Basin. 95% of these forests are natural and only 5% are cultivated. It's also very important to understand that guava is the 3rd largest bamboo in the world. It can reach a height up to 30 meters. It has a really high growth that is represented in its lifespan, where we can harvest it after 4 or 6 years after cultivated. To understand the historical background between Caldas and guava, I went back to pre-colonial period to understand how guava was very relevant for the original communities that used to live in this area, because they use it for almost everything, from musical instruments to constructions, and how throughout the centuries and after the colony, these bamboo started to lose their relevance, and now in the 20th century, they started to be replaced largely by coffee and other agricultural plantations. Guava angustifolia in the 21st century is facing several challenges. Zooming into the ecological dimension, it's important to note that even though it has a significant carbon sequestration, it has a really high rate of deforestation currently in Caldas. In the sociocultural dimension, even though it has predominantly used for construction, it has a negative sociocultural conception as the material for the poor. In the economic dimension, even though there has been efforts to establish a value chain, the low participation in the local, national, and international markets hasn't shown any consequences of this value chain. And finally, institutional dimension, even though it's part of the National Building Code, its definition as a forest resource is limiting its sustainable harvesting. Moving on to the methodological framework and how I collected the primary data, I used 2 main data collection methods. The first one is the semi-structured interview, where I interview local experts ranging from architects to designers, producers, sellers of bamboo. And I also conducted a workshop with 21 rural community members from different parts of the province. After collecting this information, I did 2 steps to analyze the information. The first one used a thematic analysis matrix, where I classified the information in past, present, future accordingly to the specific objectives, and also in the 4 dimensions that regenerative development framework provided. And after that, I use a qualitative analysis tool that is called Atlas TI that allowed me to understand the semantic networks between the information that I collected. Some findings that I had after this analysis were, first, in the past, how Gualua was still considered an important part of the landscape identity of Caldas and also of the coffee region, but at the same time, the knowledge of the local communities wasn't sufficient to recognize its value. And since it was started to use for informal settlement construction, that's why it was considered the wood for the poor. In the present, even though the academia and the industry has been developing innovative construction techniques and different ways to add value to bamboo, there is a lack of articulation between the actors or the stakeholders, and also the outdated laws, taxation, and corruption around the permits issued for harvesting gualua have been limiting its development. However, for the future, local experts and community agreed that bamboo and gualua will be the determining factor for regenerative development in rural areas, specifically in Caldas. Moving on to the conclusions and answering to the research question, what can be the role of gualua in promoting regenerative development in rural areas of Caldas? Well, the role could be first contributing to the ecological restoration of deteriorated rural areas and ecosystem through its high regeneration and also through the ecosystem services that it provides. The second one will be promoting the sociocultural appropriation of the landscape through disseminating the knowledge into new generations. The third one will be leveraging the local economy as an agroforestry species that could be produced, processed, and transformed locally, contributing to rural livelihoods and local industry. And finally, this cannot happen if there is not improvement in the current legislation that allows a sustainable management as an agroforestry resource. Some of the recommendations that also came out of this research were, first, how relevant is to develop and update the inventory of guava forest in Caldas, because it's hard to take care of something that you don't know how much you have. The second one, in the sociocultural dimension, is to train youth in regenerative management of this guava forest. The third one, in the economic dimension, is to encourage and involve the construction industry to establish guava products as part of their proposals for construction. And finally, in the institutional dimension, how important is to update the classification of guava as an agroforestry species. And finally, for the further research, I suggested 4 main topics that I touched upon during the research, but I couldn't deepen. The first one is to understand the fragmentation of a forest through the use of technological tools such as GIS and Python, and to develop and update the inventory that I recommended before. The second one is to create a compilation of ancestral knowledge of guava through an open database that put together the local knowledge of rural communities, and at the same time what academy and industry has been developed around this very valuable resource. The third one is to evaluate how circular economies schemes could work in the rural communities of Caldas. And finally, to understand how these corruption networks operating around the permits of harvesting and transporting guava can be dismantled and improve this issue. And with this, I want to thank you for listening.
Thank you for your presentation, Diana, and congratulations on a fantastic project. I'd now like to invite Tessa Chittenden, second prize winner, to present her work. Please limit your time to 10 minutes. Over to you, Tessa.
Hello, and I'd like to start by saying thank you so much to the DAIDA Foundation for this award. I'm very grateful. And today I'm thrilled to present my dissertation work, which is titled Conceptualizing a Living Urban Edge for the Philippi Horticultural Area in Cape Town, which I will refer to as the PHA. This dissertation emerged from a two-month period of volunteer urban planning work in December 2020 with the community group, the PHA Campaign. The PHA Campaign is a group of activists and small-scale farmers who are working tirelessly to halt the constant threat of development encroachment to farmlands. I continued to work with the group for my dissertation to co-produce the proposed concept. The PHA is a large tract of productive urban farmlands embedded in the Cape Flats district of Cape Town, as indicated on this map. The Cape Flats is one of Cape Town's poorest and most underserviced districts, a result of the apartheid period. The farmlands are essential for the city's food and water security, local livelihoods, biodiversity, heritage, and access to green space for poor communities. There has been a long-standing acknowledgement among politicians and policymakers that the PHA is valuable and unique and should remain agricultural land. Generally, the global best practice is to use an urban edge to protect agricultural and conservation land from urban development. An urban edge is a demarcated line beyond which urban development is not permitted. As indicated on this timeline, the first spatial policy to delineate an urban edge around the PHA was the 1967 Physical Planning Act. This timeline indicates that this long-standing policy consensus has persisted, albeit inconsistently, into the present. However, as is clear on this image, despite this ongoing policy commitment, the PHA footprint has been gradually eroded by urban development. In fact, the farmlands are now more than half their original size. Policymakers have constantly amended the urban edge to facilitate lucrative and inappropriate urban development in the farmlands, such as this proposed development. Thus, the planning issue, which my dissertation aims to respond to, is why urban development encroachment has persisted in the PA, despite the use of an urban edge, and how the current approach can be reimagined to ensure the long-term protection of the farmlands. The PHA case study is a microcosm of a global planning issue. Urban development encroachment is threatening the green space that is essential for urban climate change resilience. This land use conflict persists despite the use of urban growth management tools such as the urban edge. The urban-rural interface, where the city meets farmland, is where this tension is most pronounced. Beyond this, the planning discipline and literature has engaged very little with how the urban-rural interface can be proactively planned and designed in order to cultivate positive relationships between two land uses which are often framed as competing. The aim of this dissertation, therefore, is to respond to this challenge and imagine an alternative concept to the urban edge due to its apparent shortcomings. Using site observations, focus groups with the PHA campaign, and interviews with various stakeholders, I investigated why the farmlands have been slowly diminished despite the policy commitment to protecting it. The first issue lies in vested political interests, weak institutions, and corruption. Because the urban edge is implemented from the top down, power is concentrated under a single group, politicians, who are fallible to economic interest groups and short-term political gains. The result is that often environmental protections, such as the urban edge, are sidelined to allow for lucrative development. This was the case with the proposed Oakland City development, pictured here. These images from my field observations capture how ineffective enforcement of land use regulations are eroding the productivity and character of the PHA. The use of agricultural plots for dump sites, residential development, or bus depots is common. Informal settlement expansion due to a lack of affordable housing in the city is also a key issue. Developer speculation leaves farmland lying fallow. As previously discussed, there is generally little engagement with how to positively plan for the urban-rural interface. As a result, this area has become an ambiguous non-place, where a lack of spatial definition and a clarity allows for the legal land uses explained on the previous slide to slip through the cracks. There is also no visual gateway indicating where the PHA is, and as a result, it isn't celebrated by citizens. As a researcher, I was surprised by how few people know the PHA even exists, despite the fact that it provides more than 50% of Cape Town's fresh produce. This misses an opportunity at the urban edge to reconnect city dwellers to the origins of their food. After identifying why urban development encroachment has persisted in the PHA, I looked to solutions. Due to their local on-the-ground knowledge and passion for the area, I conducted focus groups with the PHA campaign to co-produce an alternative, the Living Urban Edge. The Living Urban Edge, as this basic diagram indicates, imagines the establishment of a consolidated and clear boundary of small-scale farms around the PHA edge. The small-scale farms can create a barrier in defense of the core PHA farmlands by breaking up large tracts of land into more defensible parcels. Having people present at the edge also allows for the passive surveillance of the farmlands to deter crime. The small-scale farm buffer can also better define land use in this currently ambiguous space by creating a legible and clear transition between urban space and large-scale farms. This creates an urban edge which is active and alive through embedding people and activity in the landscape. Due to the lack of proactive planning in the urban-rural interface, I also generated 5 design principles for a living urban edge. Due to time constraints, I cannot expand on these fully, but this diagram indicates how each principle responds to multiple challenges facing the PHA. Just to give an example of the detail I went into for each design principle, Principle 5 looked at visually defining the edge. This principle explored the idea of porous boundaries, like the permeable membranes, which are found in nature. Whilst we want to define the urban-rural interface with a clear boundary, we do not want to perpetuate separation. Instead, we want to invite people into the PHA so that it's celebrated in the city. This can arguably enhance the public will to conserve it. The diagram shows this concept. Minimum setbacks and built footprint sizes create a visually permeable barrier of farmhouses at the edge. Green buffers can also be strategically planted to ensure visual porosity. This diagram consolidates the 5 design principles into my final spatial concept for the living urban edge. Given the failures of the top-down enforced urban edge, the living urban edge looks to how communities can be responsible for the protection of land. The idea is that the farms will be unified under a community land trust, which I will call a CLT. CLTs work by purchasing land on behalf of the community and holding it in trust in perpetuity. Certain land use principles and guidelines are attached to the title deed of the land parcels within the CLT. This can ensure that small-scale farms which make up the living urban edge maintain the character of the area and continue to be used primarily for farming. I then specialized the concept on a pilot site, which is a portion of the western edge of the PHA where the urban encroachment issue is the worst. In a rapidly urbanizing world faced with the existential threat of climate change, it is essential that oases of green space and the multiple ecosystem services they provide are safeguarded in the long term. The hope is that the living urban edge can inspire other cases worldwide where open space is threatened by development encroachment. Whilst the living urban edge idea may seem unrealistic, I believe that radical ideas which challenge long-held assumptions are exactly what is needed, given the existential crisis the planet is facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tessa, and congratulations on a wonderful project.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite the first prize winners, Valerian Portokelis and Xenia Stompu, to present their entry. Please limit your time to 10 minutes. Over to you, Valerian and Xenia.
Okay, thank you. So we are very honored to receive this distinction and recognition for our work from the jury. Thank you for that, and congratulations to everyone. So let us jump directly to the presentation of a thesis, which was developed under the supervision of Professors Kelly Shannon and Bruno de Mulder. We will speak to you about riparian allegories, or how Athenian riverscapes can act as climate-adaptive urban figures. And we'll start by briefly giving you a bit of context for the city of Athens, our hometown, where our case study is also located. So Athens, capital city of Greece, owes much to its historic past and symbolic strength of the mythical landscape it is embedded. Only the rediscovery of ancient glory in the early 19th century would give it the spark to develop into a major population center of more than 4 million today, and soon its mythical past came to face urban realities of the 21st century. The city was and is enclosed in a strong geographical figure, a basin surrounded by mountains and opening up to the sea southwards, interspersed with culturally significant hills, and a dense hydrological network comprised of seasonal streams confluent in two main river flows, Kifissos River on the west and Ilissos River on the east. Explosive urbanization of the contemporary city in several waves during the last century would soon result in asphyxiating conditions for its natural substrate and an impaired landscape functioning. For the scope of this research, especially interesting is what happened to this dense hydrological network, which was massively eradicated over the years, meaning channeled, piped, or filled up. And as we can also see in the canonical example of the Kifissos River, capped by a highway not so long ago, around 2000. So this brings us directly to this year's themes of climate change, where inherent and accumulated deficiencies transforming to alarming conditions, as we are entering in an era of climate urgency also in the urban context. That is what we call an urban code red. Metropolitan Athens finds itself confronted with its fallacies, here showcasing just two out of many. So open green space deficit contrasted by an excessive ceiling of grounds, especially in the underprivileged western parts of the city. And there comes the climate crisis, further amplifying these already existing threats. And here we explore the main issues through climate data, which are presented on the left, accompanied by spatialized maps on the right. And starting with extreme heat days, which are expected to double, amplifying an already severe urban heat island effect, which affects already large parts of the basin. Intrinsically linked to that is drought and massive wildfires, which minimize peri-urban forests and endanger equally human and non-human lives. Trends show already an increase in extreme rainfall events, leading to flood hazards, especially along former watercourses and the low-lying floodplain of Kifissos River, which we see on the map. Together with all sorts of pollution, these compile an alarming future, exacerbating historic social disparities and putting deprived populations at a cumulative disadvantage, raising also questions of environmental justice in this context. What is further to highlight here is that the water figure transects all major hotspots and thus could potentially address large parts of the issues raised above. In that sense, we were led to think of the water figure as a mechanism for the climate adaptation of the city, but also an opportunity to re-establish systemic landscape functioning and combining with new spatial archetypes for open spaces. A reading of landscape functioning along with urban realities and social needs unveiled strategic areas on a metropolitan scale to reconfigure the disrupted urban water cycle through robust green-blue infrastructural commons. Upstream, central, and downstream locations are mobilized in an adaptation strategy, programming landscape infrastructures as promoters of climate equity. Main design case study is the flooding mosaic of Eleonas, a vision for the floodplain of Kifissos River, where interventions envisioned a comprehensive system of water retention, reuse, and remediation. Eleonas, meaning olive grove, an 11 square kilometer brownfield in the midst of the city, is the topographically defined floodplain of Kifissos River. Its industrialization and subsequent decline render it a field in dire need of both a social and ecological reconstruction. It used to accommodate the historic olive grove of the Athenian plain, being the only fertile ground in an otherwise arid land. This agricultural past inherits a peculiar agrarian pattern still traceable today, although deprived of its wetness, with the water flow being confined in a single hard-engineered channel at the bottom of the page underneath a highway. A thorough historical mapping combined with fieldwork unveiled a multitude of successive riverbeds throughout the plain, a braided structure as opposed to the contemporary single engineered flow. And the same agrarian patchwork, industrialized then and by and large abandoned, left very few reminiscence of vegetation, but mostly large, impervious, sealed, but yet unbuilt surfaces, laying out the canvas for potential future transformations. Another canvas is laid out by the mosaic of ownership, with large plots belonging to stakeholders of the broader public sector, intertwined with existing green spaces or terrag.
So overcoming now this predominant narrative of the single engineered flow, we counterpose the reformulation of a floodplain through a threefold water system. The site is re-envisioned as a flooded mosaic, a kidney of sorts, retaining and gradually treating stormwater runoff, setting the scene for new productive programs. Existing productive commercial facilities are carefully grouped into urban terraces and clusters, leaving room for water flows, while buildings worth maintaining, together with acupunctural new buildings and programs, are left dispersed in between the transforming landscape. Hybrid productive and forest figures complement the weaving together of landscape and urbanism, systemically yet erratically growing back the growth at a radical scale. The long-term vision for Eleonas lies on the very idea of keeping, redistributing, and reusing water, mounting up to 8% of the water use on city scale, by incrementally transforming the existing mosaic in what would be a socially grounded, multifunctional, and inhabited growth. The proposed design is one of many potential outcomes in a long-lasting process of transformation, which can anticipate for and accommodate for change. For this particular scenario, we delved into 4 exemplary cases on an urban design scale. We will just quickly show in an overview. Each of them represents a distinct instance of the condition of water. In terms of method, in all 4 of them, sculpting of topography, adjusting water flows, and enriching vegetation guide the local configuration of this peculiar metropolitan park. In the channeled grove, the massive ceiling of ground serves as potentially floodable park. Primary water treatment is performed through aerated channels that delineate urban terraces and productive orchards. In the infrastructure growth, we tackle the repurposing of the culvert underneath the highway as a sedimentation tank for primary treatment of western tributaries, while water is gradually discharged in arrays of phytoremediation that penetrate amidst the industrial clusters, creating unexpected public space. At the urban grove, the collection of rain and grey water of the surrounding neighborhoods is performed into collective cisterns, forming public squares on top as an urban edge. Intense afforestation complements an already traceable green fringe between the grove and the central parts of the city. In downstream locations, the potentially most fertile part, the braided grove, large unsealed areas covered by sports fields and empty grounds are radically re-envisioned as a productive landscape combining community-supported agriculture and new forms of agro-urban living. And so, I guess we make it. In order to get from today's condition and modus operandi as shown on the left image to the one on the right, or probably more hybrid forms between them, we definitely must change for ways to bring this kind of unthinkable and common perception, long-term vision into today's discourse, and which led us also to submit a follow-up proposal for this project, which is work in progress. But the general idea is the collection of existing yet scattered material, ideas, and knowledge, and the subsequent dissemination to public discourse. This is reflected by 2 phases of the follow-up proposal, the one starting now and going on for a year, where the collection happens and coalitions with active groups of civil society can be formed. This is to compile what we call an open-ended atlas of possibilities, which can act as bid book of sorts to approach bigger and more strategic players, eventually launching phase 2. And there it would be all about getting the word out and ideas to a wider public in a twofold process of fostering awareness through a multitude of public events and establishing precedents through pilot projects, focusing on capacity building on a local scale. So this will be undoubtedly like a big process. And I guess now with also the recognition from your side, we have more than plenty of motivation and probably also means to pursue and go on, and hopefully at some point reporting back on how this endeavor will go on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the basic hope is that we can turn this riparian allegories into some kind of riparian realities, as we also like to say. Thanks a lot. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your presentation, Xenia and Valerian, and congratulations on this amazing project. DAIDA will be in touch with the winners in the coming week for a follow-up. With this, we come to the end of the awards program. Sensitive, intelligent designs are the need of the hour, and the presentations we saw today were incredibly inspiring. Thank you to the winners for presenting their work to us. Thank you to all our viewers, shortlisted candidates, and speakers for being here with us from across the world. Thank you to the organization team of My Livable City, Mithali Chowdhury, Seema Taneja, and Sheetal Kumbhare. Last but not least, we'd like to thank the tech team, Dreamcast, for making this happen. Next slide, please. Yes. Before we close, I'd like to announce the competition theme for 2023, which is Cities for All, Addressing Minorities. All the announcements are hosted on My Livable City's website. Please do have a look and please spread the word. And please show us the last slide. For any further questions, please get in touch with My Livable City. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next year.